Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Spotlight, starring Michael Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, Rachel McAdams, Liev Schreiber, John Slattery, and Stanley Tucci, directed by Tom McCarthy. Now, I have seen this movie before, but is it the same as I'm going to think of it now? Let's get into it and find out. We start in 1976 in Boston, Massachusetts, where we see the cops arresting someone from the church he's being interrogated by the police department and is taken back home after the interrogation. And we move on to July in the year 2001 as Ben Bradley Jr., played by John Slattery, introduces Robbie Robinson, or Walter Robbie Robinson, played by but known as Robbie, played by Michael Keaton, as the new boss, and he gets introduced to Marty Baron, played by Liev Schreiber, and has a meeting with Robbie. And this movie is filled with dialogue, and it's great dialogue. While I like the characters, Mike Rezendes, played by Mark Ruffalo, hears about a priest raping children as Marty wants to sue the church about it, and while Robbie and Ben and Marty wants to talk to Ben and Robbie about the investigation of Sasha Pfeiffer, played by Rachel McAdams, gets to the questioning as they work for the Boston Globe, aka in the Spotlight area, which is a newspaper company, as Marty meets with Mitchell Garabedian, forgive me if I said that wrong, played by Stanley Tucci, telling him he wants to sue the church as he works for them, while Mike wants to talk with Mitch, and Robbie meets with Eric McLeish, who is played by Billy Crudup, about the shitty cases as they talk about suing the church. And Rachel McAdams does a great job with this performance, as does Mark Ruffalo, as the performances by every actor are captivating. Mike gets into Mitch's office and tries to write a report, and he says he doesn't want to be recorded by tape, and he makes an appointment with Mitch outside later on as Sasha gets something that Robbie looks at. And then we move on to a baseball game when Mike and Ben, and the cinematography throughout the movie is very good to watch as Robbie goes to a golf game with a friend of his named, and Sasha goes to church with her mother, and Mike jogs for the day and stops the building and sees Robbie is there looking at some articles and discusses what his friend told him, and they start getting the story as Marty meets up with the priest. As this movie is well done, well shot, and well made. Phil Saviano visits Sasha and meets with the Globe and says he was raped as an 11-year-old kid and wants to fight the church about the truth of 13 priests molesting children. And he at one point gets upset and uses the restroom, and we move on to Mitch walking in Boston, and Mike encounters him, telling him he's digging through Spotlight, and makes an appointment at 9:30 a.m. the next day. And Sasha meets with Joe Crawley while Mike meets Mitch and another victim, and the editing works great as for a complicated story, which is what this is to be told, because the truth can be sometimes hard to say as people lie all the fucking time until the truth gets revealed. After the meeting with Mike and Patrick, along with Mitch, and Patrick says to just get these assholes in jail, while Sasha calls Joe and learns Eric McLeish was the lawyer he hired years ago, and does a little work from home, while Robbie walks with Ben out to talk with Mike and gets a call from a man named Richard Gilman as a victim. On the production design is very good, and the set decoration, is well done. Robbie and Mike walk into a room where Matt looks at some files, and they look back at 1991 as Sasha calls Robbie to tell him they go back to Eric for the church purposes, as he says they're tough cases. And Eric defends the church as Sasha says the courthouse doesn't have the right files for the case. And they meet with Ben along with Mike and Matt in the room and says they've got a case, and Ben says to keep going on the case as Marty meets with Pete Conley at a dinner event while Robbie is there, and he brings up what brings up the Cardinals being there while Mike meets Mitch for dinner and talks about the case. And I like how we get to know Mike and his ancestors are Portuguese and is married while Robbie is at the event. And this movie works tremendously as director Tom McCarthy does a great job at getting the story told. And should this have been the best picture of the year 2015? No, but it is a very good movie. Mike and Robbie and Sasha learned from a man where he says 90 fucking priests are the accused while they have a shitload of victims, and they keep searching for more victims as Mike goes outside and finds a house near him and says stay away from the house down the street, and they call Eric and say 87 priests were accused of rape, and calls Jim Sullivan and says to Robbie just stop going after the story, and they go to Eric and tells them they're going to expose the priests or Eric himself, and he says to check the clips while Mike is talking with Richard as he gets a visitor from Ben to deliver a leftover pizza. And despite this movie is a lot of talking, I'm enjoying myself with the movie. Robbie and his crew and with Ben meet with Marty and to discuss the case while Sasha and Mike go from house to house and get some cooperative people while they also get some uncooperative people like a former priest living with his sister as he says he was raped until his sister kicks them off the property. And Mike gets in the courthouse about the cases and sees Joe there while Sasha and Robbie about the former priests she talked about and too, and she wants to go back after getting kicked off a few minutes ago. And Mike talks with Mitch about the case, and this is a very good movie with a powerful story. Mike hears big news runs to an office where files so they can get to Judge Sweeney to get the bastards, which is a miracle, but they need proof, and we get to the day of September 11th, 2001. When the Twin Towers break down and they see it on the TV and stop the stories to deal with the 9/11 attack. And after 6 weeks after that devastating attack, Sasha asks Phil to give them more time and walks out on her. And Mike learns from Robbie Mitch filed the documents behind his back and is pissed off about it while Sasha leaves for the night and Robbie is still working and goes in a coffee shop to talk and with Kevin about his story with the church, and Michael Keaton is very good in this movie. Mike goes to the courthouse to see some files while he's upset with the workers' attitude and talks with the judge as Robbie and Sasha talk with Jack and a couple of others where they try to stay on the same page as Mike sees something incredible and goes to the Boston Globe and tells Robbie about it and tells Matt and Sasha that's proof that they should take it to court as Mike wants to write the story right away, but Robbie says he doesn't want while Mike is upset and leaves the room upset while we see Sasha taking care of her family as Mike talks with Sasha about why he got pissed off in the last scene and why Sasha didn't go to the church with her mother anymore. And the acting in this is well done. Robbie meets with Pete for a drink and chat about the Cardinal and why the people need the church. And I understand why it's all about praying to God, in which was a failure when I reviewed Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. I felt that failure as it was more about how Jesus was killed more than what he fought the world, what he taught the world, excuse me. As Robbie learns in a phone call, and Judge Sweeney is doing the Boston Globe a favor and meets with Ben and Marty about it and with Peter, and they kick Peter out of the room, and Ben decides to tell the story about the church with a lot of priests molesting kids, and they write the story while Christmas time is happening, and we hear kids singing Silent Night, which was beautifully sung by the chorus kids, as Robbie comes to Jim's house and humiliates him in his own house, and he kicks Robbie out of the house, and he leaves as Jim comes out and asks him what took him so long and grabs the list and signs for it and shows him who to go for, which is pretty much all of it. and the shots were great to look at. Mike writes the story based on Dawn's point of view and says she doesn't want to know what the question is, and straight up tells them the story, and they begin writing the story based on what they have. As we learned, Robbie was one of them at one point in life, and they put it on a newspaper on the next morning, and comes and asks Sasha's mother as Sasha's mother seems disappointed in her daughter for writing the story. And Mike shows Mitch the newspaper, and Mike and Robbie walk in as they hear the story as a hit. They run to their section, and phones have been ringing all morning long, and the credits roll to us. The climax was very good. And did this need to be win Best Picture of the year of 2015? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 8.5 out of 10. I don't think this should have gotten Best Picture of the Year in 2015, but it is a very good film, as this movie is filled with dialogue, and it's great dialogue, and I like the characters, as I do enjoy them, following them from start to finish. And Rachel McAdams does a great job with the performance, as does Mark Ruffalo, as the performances by every actor is captivating. While the cinematography in this is very good to watch throughout, as this movie is well done, well made, well shot. The editing works great for this movie, as complicated as it is to tell a story of how the Boston Globe got the church sued, which is what this movie is basically about. And the production design is very good, and the set decoration is well done. And this movie works tremendously, as director Tom McCarthy does a great job at getting the story told. And again, it doesn't deserve the Best Picture trophy in the year 2015, but it is a very good movie. Despite this movie's all talking, I enjoyed myself at the movies when I saw this back in 2015 in theaters. And this works to this day, as this is a solid recommendation for this movie, as it is a very good movie, and that is a very serious subject, but I'm just having a fun time with them, and I'm with them just talking, and I know that makes me boring, but it's for some reason true. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me and for this review, and until then, go to church or don't. I don't care. Either way, just have a good evening.